also put up on Blackboard more of the 10-minute art fixes to make up for all these times I sent an email about that. Sort of lots of side things. A few of them are sadly longer than 10 minutes, but none are more than 20, and very few are more than 15. So play those back. The PowerPoints are there as well to make flashcards from and whatnot, but they are meant to augment these, and if you could, try to get through those. Even if you're not taking notes, just get through them so you familiarize yourself a bit with that material before next Tuesday, because that's going to impact what we're talking about next as we get to mid-century, right? Especially, we're going to start talking about surrealism today, wrap it up on Tuesday, and then we're going to be looking at some other kind of offshoots of surrealism, because this whole Dada surrealist movement is in many ways, it sets the stage for the rest of the 20th century. The things that these ideas that people like Duchamp are dealing with, the questioning the role of the artist in making art, bringing to the forefront the concepts around artistic practice, almost more than the work of art itself, right? These are really important ideas insofar as what's happened with art since then. And it's been about 100 years since these ideas first started being rolled out. Surrealism as well, with a sort of metaphysical interest in dreams and psychology. This is also a huge impact on what we're going to see in the second half of the century. So this is really kind of a crucial little moment here, because it really does establish much of what's behind art, even right up until our very day, insofar as I know anything about art since 1960. So, we were looking at Dada, and remember that in the Dada movement, the artists are embracing the idea of making art that removes the hand of the maker in a way, embraces the idea of chance rather than planning, right? And we've seen it starting in Zurich, Switzerland during the war in 1916, and that same year we see an outpost rise up in New York. And in both of these two Dada camps, which don't really have a lot of connection one to the other, in each of these two Dada camps, we have expatriate artists that have fled from other countries, landing there, and in the back of their mind, their home countries are ravaged by World War I, and here they are in a neutral country. We were neutral. America was neutral for the very last year of World War I. And Zurich, Switzerland remained neutral for the entire thing. They're thinking about where rationality, logic, human intellect had gotten us, which was into the midst of the worst violence that the world had seen up to that point. Horrific things. So that's one element of Dada, is this idea of removing the hand of the artist and embracing the idea of irrationality and chance. But on the other hand, with both Picabia and Duchamp, we look at the precision with which Picabia draws, right? It's absolutely sort of, it looks like an illustration out of a technical journal. And on a certain level, that's another way to think about getting the art out of art. Remember that Duchamp, at one point, he's in Paris, and he's at this show of industrial design, and he sees an airplane propeller, a wooden airplane propeller, and he says, oh man, we could never make anything as beautiful as that. Right? What's the point in making art? Look at this. And Duchamp is a pretty terrific draftsman, actually. Really very, very good, very precise. And when he starts to make these precise machine-like drawings, in a way he's sort of saying, I don't want to make art that's considered art capital A. Right? This is design, this is illustration, this is commercial rather than fine art. Right? So, and Picabia being so faithful to the look of the machine is kind of taking any kind of artistic creativity out of the equation. Right? So this is part of, I think, that same idea of making an anti-art. Right? Dada is often equated with the idea of an anti-art, an art where there's no artist, an art where there's no art, right? And so for Duchamp, the ready-made, right? A wooden stool with a bicycle wheel stuck on it, a toilet, turned upside down, right? This isn't any kind of craftsmanship. It's an idea, right? Even if you think about the French widow, right, which was just a French window, and he never touched the thing except to stencil his signature on it, which is not even signing it. You know, he's rubbing letters on there out of a chart pad, right? So it really, all he did was he just gave his design to somebody else. He gave his idea to a craftsman to create. These are really kind of amazingly challenging ideas when it comes to how art is made, what the ideas here are. Now, this embrace of machinery that we talked about with both Picabia and with Duchamp, remember this reminds us to a certain level of a chocolate grinder, which he made in another work of art as well. But a connection between the machine and human sexuality, human existence, exists in both of these. In fact, Picabia, there's another work, a little famous one. It's not in your text and not in your thesis either. It's a spark plug. Just a drawing of a spark plug, and he calls it homage to the young, nude American woman. And it's just a spark plug. It's not even anamorphized in anything else. Seeing these connections, right? Flame, fire, electricity, gas, right? And human sexuality, fire, eroticism, chocolates, and what it takes to get a woman to make that passage from virgin to bride, wooing, courtship, and whatnot. These concepts of, a blurring of the distinctions between machines and men, humans, is kind of a strong undercurrent in a lot of Dada art, and really a strong undercurrent in a lot of modern art around the time of World War I, and especially in the decades following World War I. We see a significant amount of interest in this idea of industry changing the modern world. Not only the things that we own, the places that we live, but also us. Almost like it's an evolution to a new quasi-robotic future, right? And the word robot is coined almost exactly the time, 1921, 22, I think, is the first time we hear the word used by a Czechoslovakian novelist, right? This idea of a mechanized man. Well, after the war is over, remember the Dada begins as a reaction against the war in these two neutral sites, New York and Zurich. But after the war is over, which remember the Great War is 1914 to 1918, after the war is over, we begin to see Dada outposts cropping up in German cities as well. And also in a sort of fierce reaction against the war, picking up some of the same themes. And many of the artists that are active in the German Dada camps are people that I talked about in one of the art fixes as being part of the Expressionist movement, the sort of second phase of Expressionism. The first phase being Kirchner and Kandinsky, right? Pre-war, very utopian. The second phase being post-war and much more dystopian, the opposite of utopian, right? Where everything's gone wrong, and socially aware and criticizing the world around them in much more direct fashion. And many of these artists get swept up into the Dada movement because many of their aims are very much the same, right? The war has enlightened us, speaking now as a 1940s German, the war has enlightened us to how horrible logic and things can be, and maybe we can use art to realign our ideas about this. So the mechanized man here that we see, and Gross does this quite a bit. I'm trying, this is kind of a crappy slide, I couldn't find a very good one. The problem is once we get to modern, this is not on display a whole lot, so I haven't seen it personally. But that's when you get to modern art, there are reproduction issues because the artist hasn't been dead long enough yet, right? The way the fair use laws say that the artist has to be dead 75 years before they can throw things out there, right? Although that's loosening a bit, I think they're starting to think that through. But nonetheless, I end up with some of these with less good slides as I would like to have. Well, Berlin, 1919, we pick up the anti-war stance that Zurich had, plus German expressionism. Particularly, there was that movement called New Objectivity that I talked about in one of the art fixes, or two of the art fixes. New Objectivity, objective approach to the world around you rather than abstraction. That is the hallmark of German art in the 20s, or early part of the 20s, and this becomes part of Dada in Berlin. And Gross is interested, as is Batavia, as is Duchamp, in the connection between industry, the machine, and our psyche, our being, right? We are part of the modern world, and one of the ways you push that metaphor through is through mechanized figures. Right? This is in your text, and I thought it was worthwhile bringing in because one of the things that Dada artists in Berlin are doing is playing with collage and photo montage as much as anywhere else. This is a series of magazine cutouts, paint applied to it, objects attached to it. The buttons on his coat are real buttons, for example. There's two more buttons on his forehead as well, and you can see that one of the eyes is cut out from a magazine and turned upside down. The mouth is a separate object. There's a submarine up there. And a rather nonsensical title. Remember Dada's interest in nonsense. Remember Uncle August, the unhappy inventor. And there's a bit of humor here as well, I think. Some of these are meant to be somewhat funny. We talked about that with Duchamp a week ago, how his works really are quite humorous in the long run, because, again, I think he's questioning everything. Part of making an anti-art is to question the seriousness of fine art, right? So what Gross has done here is he's taken the first president of post-war Germany, Friedrich Ebert, and used a portrait of him as the basis for this collage, and then he's gone over the top of it and sort of marred it all up. The German government was centered in the city of Weimar after the war and became known as the Weimar Republic. And in the years immediately following the war, there was quite a bit of wealth developing in certain parts of society, but it was pulverizing. In other words, not everybody was getting wealthy, not all the boats were floating. Yeah? And I'd already looked at some works by Gross, by Otto Dix, that dealt with this idea that the people who fought in the war were not benefiting from the post-war industrial development, right? And so this is beginning then to question that same idea. So a huge question mark over part of his forehead. There's a scalpel laid directly at his neck. You might imagine, we have political satire today, just overt and anti-authoritarian. But in 1919, this is pretty out there, insofar as sort of pushing the limits of what might be acceptable to the government in Japan. So he totally disfigured the face with, and you'll notice his nose has become machine parts as well, so again there's that mechanization. And all of the juxtapositions that you see are illogical, right? The collage is not trying to return the face to something that makes logical sense, and that's the Dada principle, right? That by doing collage, you can put things, when Picasso did collage, he put things together that made sense, right? There's a tablecloth with a cup of coffee, some wallpaper, right? Chair caning. He put things together that made sense with the overall theme of the piece. But with Dada art, it's about interruption. It's about discord. It's about a lack of logic and a lack of rationality. They might be laid out based on where they would make sense anatomically, so you've got a roll of tubing over his right shoulder that echoes the line at the shoulder, but its placement there is a jarring juxtaposition, right? It's not intended to be a rational fitting together, right? It's all about emotion. It does, doesn't it? Or coming in from the side like a fist or something, too, right? And I believe it's three-dimensional. I've not seen this. It's in the Property Center in Paris, so next time I go, I never go to museums when I'm in Paris. You know, I always go to cafes. You'll notice even his ears and it's the second eye, right? And it looks like both of those eyes and the mouth have all been cut out of the same picture, right? I'd like to figure out what picture that is. I think you could do it, you know. And then it looks as if there's almost like something splashed on his forehead, almost like a paint bucket turned upside down, or some sort of weird dismemberment, right? It's really a jarring image and full of these contradictions, internal contradictions, that again make you think that what he's, I'm sure, commenting on is what he sees to be the internal contradictions of the Weimar Republic, right? With that in mind, you might remember this from intro class. One of the great Dada photo montages, this is an amazing title, right? Cut with the kitchen knife Dada through the last Weimar beer barrel selling cultural epoch of Germany. Again, that's sort of nonsensical title, but you'll notice how the word Dada interrupts the title. Not that the title was making a whole lot of sense anyway. Remember how the Dadaists back in Zurich were making poetry? Grabbing words out of a paper bag that they had cut out of a newspaper and putting them down in whatever order they came out of the bag. There's something about this title, regardless of the interruption of the word Dada, that also suggests that careless approach to syntax, that irrational approach to syntax. And then, placing the word Dada in the middle of it, once you look down at the picture, you realize that the word Dada is everywhere, right? It just keeps popping up and interrupting the flow of images one to the other, right? Dada, 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 everywhere you look. And down up the upper right corner, the anti-Dada. All of these places where words are irrationally placed in to sort of add to this interruption of meaning, right? Many of these are recognizable portraits of people coupled with animals, obviously some words that are nonsensical, but then you'll notice also machine parts, right? Gears in the center. Race bearings, right? These are from an automobile axle. So the middle part can turn independent from the outside. So the outside will stick inside the axle and no trouble hold it, right? And allow it to turn on those bearings, right? Here's one that's been broken apart, right? And then part of, I think, some huge industrial, that's not a tire, it's not a wheel, it's a I think call it rotor of some sort, right? So all of these machine parts are part of the modern world. Steam engine, where the smoke of the engine says something about the God and enter stock, right? Everywhere we look. And then we can sort of dive into it more deeply and see some of the things that she has here, Hannah Hoch does. Portraits of politicians. Friedrich Ebert is there again over here. This is Ebert there, the president of the Weimar Republic is there. And he's immediately next to, you know who this is? Can you recognize him? The one in the middle, the big one with the two records for his eye. Two vinyl records for an eye. And some big bug coming out of the top of his head. Who is that? Do you recognize him? Usually you see him older. It's Einstein. Right? It's a very young Albert Einstein. Right there in the middle. And all of these slogans everywhere. Dada superimposes, Dada left down there on the right, just over here. Dada superimposes, and the idea of superimposition is that you place one thing on top of the other to partly obscure it and partly alter the way in which it's interpreted. You have another one here. It says, ha ha, see young man, Dada is not an art movement. In other words, it's denying its own existence, denying that it is doing anything. Which is, again, utterly irrational and totally Dada in its outlook. Invest in Dada, something else. One of the other ones says as well. Thanks, Gracie. We have artists and entertainers as well. That's Katie Kollwitz, our German expressionist printmaker, mother with a dead child from the very beginning of the century. She's still around, right? That's her there. We have Marx and Lenin are here. There's Karl Marx just there. There's Lenin there. So more of these political leaders, again, juxtapositions that are at once funny and irrational. We have figures standing on each other's heads as well. At the same time, there are some political elements as well. You'll notice in the lower right corner, just here, is a map of Germany, of Europe, and it's highlighted. You'll notice some of the countries are white and some of them are black. The ones that are highlighted, the ones in black, are the places where women couldn't vote. So the idea of cutting through the Weimar beer gallery with a kitchen knife is a feminist statement, right? Like, hey, women have something to do here too, and let's push our way through, right? Because the kitchen knife is, woman's implement, if you will. At that point, it's way before Anthony Bourdain and whatnot. A woman's implement is something that suggests the kitchen. Also here in the corner we see this fantastic two-headed ballerina there. The ballerina's head is George Grosz, is one of them. And the other one is another Dada artist in Berlin named John Hartfield, who we'll look at next. So some of her contemporaries all pulled together here. Right? Dadaisten, right? I called you guys in emails modernists, right? Dadaists are there as well. So again, utter irrational overlay of images meant to get a certain meaning across, but at the same time embracing this idea of irrationality, lack of continuity, which lies very much at the heart of Dada. Right. One of the things that many of these artists are working in is what we call photomontage, right? And although this is simply a collage, a photomontage is where you do something very similar, and then you take a photograph of that and print it, right? So, or you can either work that or work the things together into a negative and print from that negative, right? And in one of the online art fixes, I talked about Alexander Rodchenko, who almost at the exact same time is experimenting with photomontage and photo collages, right? And the early 20s all over Europe is really 1920 to 25 is the great period of early photographic experimentation. The technology has been around for 100 years. Access to cameras have become widespread enough that more and more people are taking photos. But what we find is that all of these artists who are really interested in abandoning tradition, you've seen it so many times, one of the things that helps them to abandon tradition is to pick up a camera, right? Because doesn't that also kind of remove the artist's hand in a particular way, right? It's just a machine that opens and shuts, right? And in so doing, light, without your intervention, exposes itself on a piece of photosensitive paper, right? So it's another way in which technology, the machine, for the modern world has produced something that is questions tradition, right? It questions the traditional artist's role. So John Hartfield is working in photomontage in particular, right? These are not collaged together in the way that others are, but are a single unitary surface, but obviously based on the idea of collages, and they're really terrific, but at the same time kind of frightening. He was actually, Johann Herzfeld, but he changed his name because he hated the Nazis, right? He moved to America eventually and changed England, but eventually changed his name in order to deny his German heritage. He'd been a painter in Berlin, And in the 20s, he was brought into the Dada group by George Gross, who we looked at the beginning. And at which point he stopped painting altogether, turned entirely to photo montage. That became his lone field of endeavor. And interestingly enough, Hartfield burned every single one of his paintings except for one when he turns back. If I'm done, I don't want any record of this part of my career. So from what I've read, I haven't seen the picture, but he burned everything but one painting as he turned over. I find it bad too, but courage of your convictions, right? Stick to your convictions. Get rid of all this stuff. And he's not really the first who's done things like that. He's saying, hey, I'm not doing this anymore, and I'm going to wipe every trace that I've ever done it off the thing. This is what I want to be remembered for. So he printed these on his own, right? These photo montages, and he printed them up in multiples because once you've got the negative based on the collage, right, you can print up as many as you want. Much like an etching, right? You can print up multiple there. But he was going around guerrilla style, the streets of New York, and tacking these things on telephone poles, kind of like when I was going up in Portland, they were always, the Nirvana posters on the telephone poles, stacks and stacks of them. But he was going around and just putting these things out as protest art. Almost like a Rihanna, right? It's almost like modern street art in a way, right? Except he's not actually painting it there, he's doing it in the studio. So here, right, again, it's almost like what we saw with George Gross in one of those online lectures, where we see this critique of a Germany where the wealthy are getting wealthier, and the people who actually fought the war for Germany's now reconstructed economic renewal are uncared for, right? And so our wolf figure there with the top hat, right, the hyena, actually the wolf, the hyena, marching over bodies of the dead that kind of remind us almost, doesn't this composition remind you of that great Delacourt picture of liberty leading the people? It's not that in. It's just kind of hitting me right now that, how she's stepping out and she's got her breast exposed, everybody's rallying around her, and the bodies of the corpses are there in the foreground. But somehow this is a cheering image of victory through the war. And yet here it's much more just sort of trampling over the top of it, right? And howling directly at us, frightening. So what the last hope of the wealthy is the dark wars and corpses, right? Totally like Goya stuff. And in fact, I don't know if I have Goya coming in, but I think these artists are all, because Gross is definitely into it, and so is Otto Dix, who are both in this group of people that are, on one hand, like new objectivity expressionists, but on the other hand, they're also swept up in the Dada Berlin and the critics of everybody, like a vacuum, and stuff. But you're exactly right. All those artists have been looking very much at Goya, particularly at the Disasters of War series that he had done, and had never published during his own lifetime. He did them when the French had occupied Spain in 1810. And he was so afraid of what the backlash would be if he were to publish these that he never did. They're incredibly violent and very hard to look at. As is this, I think, on a certain level. I believe that once you get to war protest art, there are 3 or 4 touchstones that people will turn to. One of them would be these Germans, and another one would be Goya, right? Because there's still, to this day, 200 years later, that much that powerful as a piece of imagery. Not everything is violent. Sometimes it's somewhat funny. Adolf Übermensch. Übermensch is the Superman, right? That was Nietzsche's word for our next phase of evolution. We talked about Kirchner. We talked about the influence of the philosopher Nietzsche, how he said that unless we understand that we are in a phase of evolution, we will never continue to evolve to become Superman. Okay? Well, that to Kirchner meant one thing. That meant something else to Hitler. Right? Hitler loved Nietzsche as well, and he said, fine, let me help it along. Let's kill all the Jews. Help it along a little bit. And so here's Adolf Übermensch, and what Doug Malcolm's heart is Nazi in the old German monkey's cross, but then his esophagus is made up of a series of coins. He's just swallowing money, right? There's another great one. We don't have it in a local collection where by Hartsfield. They're really quite funny. And one of them is the root of the Nazi salute. And the Nazi salute was always like this. When Hitler does, he does it like that, right? And he did this photo montage where Hitler's going to end up like this, and there's this big corporate bigwig handing him money. It's like looking right on his hand. The real meaning of the Nazi salute is to try to milk as much money out of the system as you can and milk it away from the people that need it the most, right? So Hartsfield is really a huge part of this. And the Nazis are just now rising the tower in 1931, right? But he's been part of this Dada Berlin movement going back to sort of the middle part of the 20s, right? So here he is swallowing gold. I think in many ways, Brianna, you might remember from last semester's 19th century class that another person that I think they're looking at is somebody like Daumier. Remember the Gargantua who's being fed nothing but bags of money and crapping out official proclamations, right? I think this is in many ways the same thing. He's been eating all this money, and what is he's opening his mouth and saying nothing, right? Spouting his doctrine, which is really empty. Right? These posters put Hartsfield number 5 on the Gestapo's most wanted list. Number 5, right? Because they knew he was doing them. They put him around town. People were laughing at him and mocking him, and they wanted him. There was 1933. He was almost captured. He heard them coming up the stairs, and he dove out the window. He was fortunately on the first floor, right? So I didn't have to fall down that far, but he dove out the window and sprained his ankle and went limping off into the night and couldn't find him. Fled to Czechoslovakia, then to England, then to the United States, right? But he came like milliseconds from getting caught and killed, right? And all for his real purpose. We have 2 more Dada artists to look at, and they really do signal a swing from Dada into the next movement, which is surrealism. The first is Kurt Schwitters, too. The more work that Kurt Schwitters I see, the more I really, really like him. He is, for my money, one of the great collage artists that's ever lived. Just absolutely terrific. And these works are not only collage, but it's manipulated. There's quite a bit of drawing and writing and painting over the top of the collages, right? He's working in the German city of Hanover. There are Dada outposts everywhere in the 20s because it was this poignant moment where everybody really felt totally gutted by the war, and Dada answered their desires, right? So, he too was working with collage, but very rarely with photographs. They're almost always printed matter. And very rarely with things that are as overtly Dada, although the word Dada is here somewhere, right? It says movement Dada on it. We'll get to what where that is. It's kind of hiding from me right now. But we'll see it in close-up as it comes up. He calls these collages that he's making, he calls them Märzbilder. Now, build in German, or builder is plural. Build in German is painting, right, or image. Das Bild, right, die Bilder is image. And März is a word he made up. This is kind of definition. A word he made up. And it's a word that comes from the German word Kommerz, K-O-M-M-E-R-Z. Commerce, exactly. These are commercial images, if you will. Images of commerce. But just as the word, right, Kommerz becomes März, if you think about the way he's worked this, right, Kommerz becomes März. It's what's left over from commerce, right? That's exactly what these images are about. They're what's left over from the capitalist commercial world. They're fragments of the stuff left behind. And that's something we talked about in one of the Osman lectures, being similar to an idea that we find in constructivism in Soviet Russia, where all of a sudden with the advent of the Soviet Revolution in 1918, we start thinking, okay, the trash, the detritus, the leftovers of that society can become our Peirce is working in a very similar mind, in a similar conceptual arena, where what he has are these leftover bits, these scraps, right? The collected junk on the street, he is going to take and transform into something unique, something that speaks volumes about the future. Yeah, which was a joke, exactly. But it's famous for some people and not working for others as well, definitely. Entering into that. And so what Smithers would do would be to keep drawers full of ticket stubs, notes, ledger pages, just the kind of the paper printing junk. And that's what he's focusing on, are these printed things, right? That you get a laundry ticket, right? A receipt. My wallet's always full of shit, because I hang on them for a little bit just in case, and then you just throw them away. But what they are symbols of transactions, symbols of commerce, right? Leftover bits. And so everywhere we look, we find these elements. And sometimes there are other things that he will plot. And there's this piece of newspaper, larger headline. I think that's the top of either a beer bottle, that's that circular bit there, right? The foil top of a beer bottle coming up across the top of the vodka, or on the top of a champagne bottle. You often see that, right? And in addition to the foil that comes around the side of either champagne or wine, there sometimes is, of the finer bottles, another little doily kind of on the top of it. And I think that's what that is, involved like that. Yeah.
I noticed that his words that he was making, annotating license cards. What does this word mean?
It's the German word for the, right? And as you might imagine, it's an incredibly common word in German printed matter. So this would be why it comes up. And sometimes, in a way, it's not unlike what we saw with Picasso's collages. And again, there's an overlap here, I think, right? When we looked at Picasso's synthetic cubist pieces, or what Braque was doing stencils, right, you see parts of words, parts of things. And so, in this case, having the word the with nothing, the what, right? The nothing. Is that fragmentation, that even the idea of a Merzbild suggests fragmentation, right? Suggests remnants. So that there's also this Dada anti-art idea, right? It's it doesn't matter, right? It's not the this, it's not the that, it's the nothing. It's the non-art in itself, right? At the same time, he gives these larger, he gives like 8 or 9 of these big ones. These larger Merzbild, even though it's got a number, right, 31B. But it gives them these amazing names. Radiating World has a sort of futuristic, and I don't mean like the futurist, but futuristic science fiction, space travel, hopefulness to it. Radiating World, it glows, and the way he's painting it makes it seem almost as if, like with this element here, that it's glowing from within, and that he's shading it so it looks as if even this bit here maybe is rays that are coming out of the painting, right? There's something about it that suggests this sort of the sort of spiritual things that people were seeing in modern technology that we talked about in other locations. But other ones are called things like star picture, right? There's one in Dusseldorf called star picture. There's another one in MoMA called revolving, that is just meant to be the idea of moving in revolutions, which suggests weightlessness on a certain level, right? Forces coming together, right? Cosmic forces coming together, generating ideas of motion, spreading, of rays shooting outward around. Again, all of this, if you think about it, and something that Amanda had mentioned before, the idea of using printed matter, right, as the basis for this, from hand-printed to some machine-printed matter, as the basis for design, is a period when Germany is using printed currency as well. And as we move through the 20s with that economic shift, we're going to find that paper currency gets increasingly devalued. And there was this fear that with paper currency rather than coins, where the value of the currency is the value of the metal that's involved in making the coin, right? Paper currency is only worth anything because of what somebody's printed on the paper. It's not worth anything in and of itself.
And that's exactly what happens when we're guilty of being pictured of it like, well, there's money there, nothing, but people are just using it like fools.
Indeed. And over and above that, as inflation starts to kick in, you get them being devalued. So what was once, 100 marks, say, that would have bought you a chair, would now buy you a loaf of bread. And that only underscored this idea that it doesn't matter what's printed on here, none of it means anything. So, Jay, your question about the big word "thus," so what, right? It doesn't matter. None of it really means anything. And then there are these, postage stamps, which are also bearers of economic currency, right? That's, what did they used to use in marks before below mark, pence, but whatever, right? 10 cents, 5 cents. Also stuff here, including postage, postman's cancellation stamps as well. So the stamp can be, it can be devalued in multiple ways. It's no longer worth anything as soon as the post office is with that, right? It's worth the rest of that letter's travel, and from that point, by simply pressing onto it another piece of ink, it's not worth anything anymore. It's not worth what it says it's worth. So it's questioning all these I think it's really a fantastic concept. He's using these to question ideas about how does something that has something on it make meaning that lasts, right? That's what artists are trying to do, right? Put marks on something to produce a meaning that lasts. And everything around him in Germany is suggesting that when you make marks on things, there's nothing to suggest that they do last. There's nothing to suggest that they are permanent. Right? So, he really fascinating things. We've got a few of these around. Because the larger Merz builders, which are these painted Merz works. The radiating world is 3 feet tall, right? It's fairly large, 3 by 2.5. But he also does smaller collages that he calls Merz drawings or Merz sketches, suggesting that what he's doing with these is working out ideas that he will then develop into more sophisticated concepts in the larger Merz pictures, right? So these are Merz sketches, Merz drawings. And again, the same idea, bits of like a calendar perhaps, or some sort of calculation there on the left, but then with also colored pieces of paper and working through this composition, telephone number on the right. He sees a certain amount of order. I think this is one of the things that makes him a difficult fit with Dada. He adopted this idea, but he's never really comfortable with being called Dada. He says that Dada merely poses interruptions, antitheses, right? But Merz, he says, and he starts to put Merz out there as this philosophy, right? A guiding idea that Merz reconciles antitheses. He brings them together to make a whole. Pure Merz is art, where Dada is non-art. He really doesn't like the idea of irrationality with juxtaposing his work. Okay? So he later added, wrote about this period, and he says, I wrote out the revolution, he said. I got on the wave and just wrote it through. And he said, I passed myself off as a Dadaist, even though I never was one. Right? He's much too interested in the intricacies of institutions. Max Ernst is our last Dada artist. He's in the city of Cologne. Like many of our post-war German artists, he had served in World War I. And he too picks up the idea of the found object the illogical, sometimes juxtaposition. He develops this kind of art that he calls frottage, F-R-O-T-T-A-G-E, and what it is simply is a rubbing. He's taken things that he found on the street, put them onto the paper, and then rubbed them, and took that open start to rub the textures that he found, and lets them then inspire a composition, in this case, two doves, right, that are embracing each other. Why he called them conjugal diamonds, I couldn't find out. Conjugal means, right, a conjugal business. They're having intercourse. But why diamonds, I can't really tell you. But the way that he went about this was to simply rub it on these different textures. And as he moved his paper from texture to texture and done these rubbings, one on the next, he then looked at what he had and saw what it suggested to him. And was able from there then to pull out this sort of precise drawing of this mechanized bird. Okay? He said that they were like hallucinations for him. And he started doing it when he was visiting the coast at one point. And once he figured it out, he started collecting things that he could bring back to the studio with him. Leaves, pieces of thread, linen and whatnot, and just lay them down in the studio and start to do these rubbings with the hopes of eventually arriving at something. And then he would turn these into etchings, right? They became the basis for compositions that he then etched. He did a whole series called Natural History. And I think on a certain level this is a pun because on one the images are mostly of the sorts of things you would find in a natural history book, animals, birds, whatnot, things in nature. But at the same time, the compositions are based on objects that he found in nature that weren't relative, were not at all related to these things that he picked up and rubbed. So it's a natural history in two different ways, right? It's images of things from nature, but it's made from rubbing other things from nature that he brought into the studio and juxtaposed. So this is our Dada movement. It's really, I think, a fascinating and incredibly important movement, one that embraces on some level irrationality, questions the role of the artist, and brings in ideas of creativity that are breaking really every single rule that's out there at this time, and present to any of us who've made art a really fertile ground for thinking about ways to experiment further with what we do and break the things that keep us back from doing what we really like to achieve. Now, Max Ernst was originally in Cologne, but he'd actually moved to Paris by 1922. So while he started out as part of Dada Cologne, in 1922 he moves to Paris. And a lot of artists are moving back to Paris after the war in the early 20s or late teens. And they form a group called Dada Paris. So Max Ernst is part of both groups, right? He begins in Dada Cologne and then winds up as one of the central figures in Dada Paris. And this core group of artists that are working in Paris around 1920 begin as the Dada group, but they transform to become the Surrealists in 1924. Right? Fairly early on. So Dada Paris simply morphs over to Surrealism. And what makes them morph is great fun. Is this man, André Breton, who is a poet, and he writes a manifesto of Surrealism. He didn't like Dada. He did. But he didn't like what was happening. He said that by 1924, Dada had started becoming far too commercial, far too accepted, right, far too popular. It's sort of like the people, a lot of people like do this with indie bands, right? Like the first album was really great, but that third one, they totally sold out, right? Dude, Wilco was really good back in the day, but these days, whatever. Right? And that's what Breton's argument was, that with Dada in Paris, because then it became too commercialized, right, to accept it. And so he writes a manifesto called the Surrealist Manifesto. And he basically says we need to get back to some things that Dada was doing, but in a different way. And he says what we need to do is to use art as a way of, and by art he means not just visual art, because he's a poet, right? Use art as a way of mining who we really are. And he says there's a certain kind of reality. This is the word surrealism, right? Have you ever pulled that word apart? Surrealism? What is, anybody speak any French in here? And what does this word mean? Sur. Merci. Sur. Let's see. Mon ordinateur est sur la table. Sur la table. Right? Things sur la table, right? On top of it, right? So sur realism above reality. Right? Metaphysics. That's what metaphysics is. Right? So surrealism is exactly for the synonym to metaphysics. If there's something out there, and we've seen this so many times, right? There's something out there beyond what we see. There's a higher meaning. There's a higher reality. And what the poem says is that the place that we find insight into that higher reality, this is what separates us from Mondrian and the place we find that higher reality is in our dreams. Dreams, the life of the dream is a window into medicine, into surreality, right? Higher reality. Surrealism is trying to capture that supernatural realm that we all have some key into because we all dream. So, as you might imagine, since he's interested in dream life, right? Who do you suppose he's reading? Getting into dreams as an avenue to find out what we're really all about and what's really going on. Sigmund Freud. Exactly right. He's reading the writings of Sigmund Freud. As Freud tells us in his psychoanalytical method is that by analyzing what happens in the dream, we can figure out the problems that we have that we can't address in the real world. Right? It's insight into the things that are really perplexing us. Right? So if you go to therapy and you have a Freudian psychotherapist, he's going to say, what did you dream about? And you'll figure out what it meant. Right? Exactly. It's exactly about the subconscious, right? And this is different than the unconscious, right? Because Dada is kind of about the unconscious, isn't it? Randomness is not consciously done. It's not the subconscious, right? So surrealism and the subconscious, that's the place where we can get to this world outside of our perceptions. This world that's above the physical world that we're used to seeing. So interest in dreams, interest in the simplicity of childhood. Freud is very much into asking about childhood experiences and how they might have affected our development and who we are. Right? These are things that the Dadaists are kind of working with, a simpler kind of art, one where you're not rationally thinking it through. Remember, Dada means hobby horse, right? We'll stick with the horse analogy. It's one of the meanings for Dada. It's a child's words for daddy. So this idea of looking back to childhood for meaning, looking to dreams for meaning, pulls out of Dada, but becomes at the heart of surrealism. And Max Ernst gets swept up into this, right? So up in Baltimore, tiny little painting by Max Ernst. I think he designed the copper frame as well, the hammered copper frame around the outside. But there's the picture's only about like yay. And a lot of surrealist pictures are tiny and meticulous because I think they're getting in and diving into the work and sort of analyzing some dreams they themselves have had. And as you look at the picture in the middle, I have a detail, you can see it better, it has a sort of dream quality. The darkened landscape, the looming animals that are there. And they're birds. Max Ernst got this thing for birds. He said he had an alter ego that was named Lok Lok. this large bird named Lop Lop, right? And that he knew about from childhood and he knew about in a dream. Here's a close-up of the chimera is a monstrous bird from mythology. And here inside this dream-like landscape, you can see that there are these fighting birds with their beaks at each other, their claws coming together, and then it takes you back to this, doesn't it? And think about this conjugal dynamics and whether or not they are conjugally engaged or something different from that, right? But quite obviously, a nonsensical, dream-like environment. The nonsensicality came out of the Dada movement. But the interest in dreams, right, that's what separates from the surrealist movement. So we really can't call any works of art surrealist prior to 1924, prior to the Turpin poem, prior to André Breton writing that manifesto. We have works of art that might fit the mold if they were made later, but the problem is they weren't, right? And people like Hieronymus Bosch in the 16th century, God, they loved him, you know, because he's doing exactly what they're doing. He's mining the depths of the human psyche and entering into creating these dream worlds that are meant to reveal deeper truths about human existence, right? Bosch, B-O-S-C-H. This is the 500th year of his death, and there's a huge exhibition right now in Rotterdam. I just can't get to the level coming up in the fall in Spain, the first major retrospective of this stuff in a long time. He's all over the news right now. Go look it up online. Google News and you'll find all sorts of things about that. They love it, you know. And these monster birds here, Bosch has always got monster birds doing stuff in his pictures as well, so that's certainly a touchstone for Ernst and others. Birds were, for Max Ernst, one of his primary motifs. I love this piece. It's up in MoMA. It's a box, so it's about like this deep, right? The frame is really deep, and the glass is on the front of it, and it steps back, and it's a series of, you know, very Dada-looking collages and painted elements as well, but then three-dimensional bits, so that game actually does come out. And there's a little kiosk-like element there. It looks like a bulletin board, maybe, right? And a figure running across the top of it with a doorknob right next to it. The figure at the top is carrying a child in his arms. And the woman is fleeing with a knife away from that arch that she owns in the background. And then there's that bird floating in the ground. And across the bottom is written, 2 children are threatened by a nightingale. Well, there's nothing really threatening about a nightingale. And there's nothing really threatening about the bird in this piece. But we do have these elements that relate to sort of a dreamlike environment with faceless figure running off with a child, a frightened woman running away from nothing, but still holding a horrible weapon in her hand, a knife, right? So for Ernst, these bird motifs were prominent, and one of his ways into channeling into this surrealist idea of metaphysical state that's revealed through dreams. Another surrealist artist in Paris actually arrived in Paris as part of the Dada movement, and then got swept up into the surrealist movement. His name is Man Ray. Came from New York to Paris in 1921, and then in 1924 joined the surrealist group. Man Ray, as you might guess, is not his real name. His real name was Emmanuel Radnitsky, right? Man Ray, right? Emmanuel Radnitsky. And he changed it from that to Man Ray to this rate of anti-Semitism that was growing in Europe after the war. And while working in New York, he was friends with Picabia, friends with Duchamp, right? Part of New York Dada. And then moves off to Paris to join Paris Dada, and then gets swept up into surrealism. Certain things he shares with Duchamp and Picabia is the ability to and interest in really tight, precise engineering drawings, machines, and machine-made elements, all of this great precision. Man Ray himself had actually trained as an architectural draftsman. He had done illustrations for mechanical manuals prior to turning to fine art, and had worked for a math publisher. You might imagine how precise you have to be to work in maths, right? And he brings that same hard-edged linear precision to his painted works as he moves into fine art. In training, working for a publisher, he has begun to train using an airbrush. And that's what he's used for this as well, right? He called it a pistolet, a pistol, right? But his airbrush, you can see quite clearly this has all been airbrushed, right? Stopped out and airbrushed. But because he's using an airbrush, which, sprays the paint, right? It works like a spray can, but it's much more precise and controlled. Different knobs. Have you ever used an airbrush before? Yeah. Different nibs give you different widths of spray. They're quite fun to work with, but let's see, what was I going with that? Right. He calls them aerographs, or aerographs, right? Because of the air that's coming through them. That's the nickname for these kinds of paintings. Now, what is this a painting of? He said it was inspired entirely by something he had recently seen. He had gone to a cabaret and had seen some Spanish dancers. And he then went back into the studio, inspired by the dance that he had seen, he had come up with his composition. By also looking at various objects that were simply laying around the studio at the time. So I'm not quite sure what those things at the very top are. They spinning tops or something, maybe lamps of some sort. Definitely a lamp on the upper left. Those paddles down below, I don't know if they're from the dance itself. Is the blue and black element here meant to be a human figure seen from the side with his hands out? It really doesn't matter. What he's ended up doing is taking what he's seen and translating it into something abstract. There are other elements, too, that look very much like a dress, right, without a body inside of it, buttoned up the front and strapless. All of these elements may be other things meant to be the lights from the stage shining down on the dancers. In any event, he's broken away from representing what he saw and trying to evoke the feelings that he had in seeing the Spanish dancer. Another Man Ray work is a lithograph based on some photography work he was doing. He's been making photos where, in early photography, the negative was often printed on glass. You'd have a glass negative, and then you would lay that on top of the, and now we use celluloid, or we don't, now we use digital, but, after that we used film was in celluloid, right, this plastic-like stuff. But originally they were glass negatives, and you would lay the glass negative either directly on the sheet of paper, or you could put a light above it and project it through, right, with a lens. And what Man Ray was doing, is another of these artists that's really experimenting with the technology of photography, is he would actually just take the glass and scratch it. Because once you realize how this system works, right, in the first place, like all it is that there's something on it that makes the light go through it differently, then why not do something else, right? Why not do something really cool with it? Well, so he started scratching it and cracking it and printing that just to see what he has happen. Again, it's kind of like a Dada idea in itself, right there, right? Breaking the wheel. So this is a lithograph based on that. He's got some mechanically drawn forms and some broken glass that has been transferred to the lithography plate, right? Photo transferred to the lithography plate for printing. Right? And actually this is, I think in fact this was actually printed on a piece of, let's see, I have a little stuff down here. I don't have my list here. This is printed on something you can actually see it from both sides. It was mounted in a self-standing, the original was at least mounted in a self-standing frame, but this is a print, and you can see the signature at the bottom. But we have these gears and teeth, and the word dancer, right? And this French title that was revived in Paris, The Impossible, L'Impossible, right? But the word dancer, so again he's getting back to the same thing we had before. He's translating these experiences where he watches performances of dance into something entirely different, something much more mechanized. And again, this idea that we have all over in modern art that artists are embracing mechanization in this way. In this case, it's a series of keys, right, with other elements that are screw heads and so forth. And does this remind you of things that we've seen before? The idea that the human, in this case, dance, can be translated into the guts and ears of the machine. Futurism is definitely part of it, but even earlier tonight, or this afternoon, we saw Batavia sort of making sex out of machines, right? Machine turned quickly. Number 2 is a man. Number 1 is a woman. They're meshing together, right? One turns the other. In this case now, the dancer becomes this machine with the words scrawled right across. What's interesting about the way he's written the word dancer is the bottom hook of the C is a little higher than it probably should be, so that it's possible to almost misread it as danger as well. Yeah. And in fact, he intended that. Right? He intended it to be dancer/danger. Because, a theme that we've seen a lot, the idea of erotic attraction is itself dangerous. Right? And a dancer inspires within him this, and it would seem to suggest that maybe he has no control over it, right? These erotic ideas, and that is in itself dangerous. I have this slide somewhat out of order, but the idea of the cracked glass and the machinery is something that Duchamp was working with back in America when Man Ray was there. And there's an art fix up there about the large glass, which is in Philadelphia. So if you're coming with us, we will go see this in person and talk about it more there. But the idea of the dancer danger is, in fact, something that he was working with. And let's see if I can get this to work. Do I have internet connection? I may not have internet connection. He made a movie called Dancer Danger. And I love this room, right? I had it in there. My YouTube video, and I've got no Wi-Fi in here, so I can't show it to you. So you have to wait until it goes up on it's on Blackboard, so Sarah can look at it right now. You can get internet, but do you have internet? I think so. No, it doesn't. So suffice to say, right? He made a movie of this where he actually does these mechanized objects spinning in space and juxtaposes them with nude bodies, also seen spinning in space, right? So the dancer presents danger to him, and this is something that is, in fact, on his mind. One last work from Man Ray, a very famous work. You've probably seen this before. He made multiple versions of this. The first one was made in 1921. This is a retake of it in 1970. It gets from Duchamp the idea of the ready-made. Remember how Duchamp was taking objects he's found and sometimes manipulating them a bit in order to change their meaning, right? Like the Mona Lisa postcard with the inscription on the bottom of it, or the bicycle wheel attached to a chair or upended toilet. Well, in this case, Man Ray has taken an old-school flat iron. You know, back before electric irons, right? You put the iron on the top of the stove, and that's how you did your ironing, was heating it up on the stove top, right? So it's just a big hunk of iron with an insulated handle. And he attached to it a series of roofing nails, right, that are simply glued to the surface, which means it can no longer function as an iron. And then he gives it a new name, and he signs it a gift. And the original was a real iron. This is now a bronze cast from later, right? Which is an addition, number 6 of 11, in the Smithsonian American Museum. It too, by altering it, picks up sexual overtones. This might not be obvious at first, and this is something that he shares with Duchamp. That's something that's in Dada and in surrealism. Is a certain misogynist eroticism, male-based, objectifying females, sense of eroticism. I think it's already there with the impossibility on the right. Man Ray said that after he made the gift, he said, instead of ironing, what you could do with this is tear a dress to ribbons, he said. And then he went on to explain that he did it once. Right? I used it as an iron and I shredded a dress, and then I gave it to a young girl to wear while dancing. And that he stood back and watched her dance in this dress that he had made from this iron from the gift. And he said he just sat back and marveled watching her body as it appeared beneath the ribbons, and he could see through the dress. This twisted, weird stuff. But it's totally surrealist, isn't it? Right? Sort of manipulation of reality as we're used to seeing it. And there's a degrading objectification of women that is a fairly common theme in surrealism. It's a man's world out there. Now, Man Ray is best remembered as a photographer. Have you guys seen this photo before? It's a pretty famous, right, photo in the history of photography. He was the one that took the photo of Duchamp in drag as Rose Salavi. Right, that was a Man Ray photo. And in fact, that photo that we had of Breton wearing the goggles and that funky thing on his head, that was a Man Ray photo as well. Right? And he's best remembered as a photographer and doing these surrealist juxtapositions, where he takes a well-known composition and alters it to produce an entire meaning. So the title of this Ang's Violin relates to a very prominent painter from the 19th century, Jean-Auguste Dominique Ang, one of Jacques-Louis David's pupils, a neoclassical romantic painter from the early 19th century, right? Yeah. I think totally, right? Because you play her like a violin, right? And if you play her, if you pluck her strings, she sings, right? So it's totally, only men come up with these kinds of ideas, right? And certainly the association between women and music is a very, very long one, back to the Renaissance, right? There's a Titian painting from the Louvre, which Man Ray would have known because he's in Paris, right? Where women are the inspiration of men's music. And so, Amanda, another way you could interpret this is not that she's a musical instrument, but that she is the inspiration of music in the hearts and minds of those that see her. And that by looking at the fret mark on the sides, the sound holes from her back, what you're seeing is an acknowledgement of exactly what Titian acknowledges here, which is that inspiration comes from another source, and that she could be the source of inspiration. But it can certainly be read both ways. And calling it Ang's Violin recalls the works of Ang, this one's in Phillips, where you can see that's the basis for the general composition as well, right down to the bathing cap turban wrapped around her head, right? The body seen from the back, the focus on the back itself. But he's now turned it into a violin. Ang's violin is a French idiom. It's an idiomatic expression in French. Le violin de Ang is a French way of saying a hobby. Because Ang was known when he wasn't painting to play the violin. So violin playing was his hobby. So if you've got a hobby, let's say, your hobby is, model trains, right? That would be your violon d'Ang, right? That would be your Ang's violin, right? And so by titling this Ang's Violin and quite literally making her into a violin based on the Ang composition, he's also saying that she's a hobby, right? She's just a hobby. It's really misogynistic stuff. And I'll leave you with just one last thing. She's Kiki, a very, very famous model in 1920s Paris. Kiki of Montparnasse, a pseudonym of an illegitimate child who was living with her mother in Paris, but she was born out of wedlock. And she was Man Ray's lover in the 20s and posed a model for many of these things. That's her on the right as well. So by calling her Ang's Violin, and they're not married either, he's suggesting that his lover is his hobby as well. Right? So we will wrap up. We'll wrap up Man Ray and move on to mainline surrealism, stuff that you're more familiar with, like Dali and Miro on Tuesday. So be sure over the weekend to at least play back those art fixes. Ideally, play them back and take those like, it's homework and whatnot to make up for our lost time. But a lot of that stuff comes to play with where we're headed, right? Those two things are really working hand in hand right now. So I'll make reference to them in class on Tuesday, and it will make more sense if indeed you will play them. And like Sarah was able to do in class, if you want to play back that short Man Ray video that I found on YouTube. The Dada artists were all making film. There's a ton of Dada film out there. It's really freaking cool stuff.